This is the Ted Wallison Podcast. Brought to you by Halenda's, the meat people. Enjoy their award-winning products at selected Metro, Sobeys, Fortino's, and Foodland locations. Halenda's, the way sausage should taste. And Tom's Place. For the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices, it's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. And now, here's Ted Wallison.
My special guest this week is an actor, producer, writer, and the founder of the Canadian Comedy Hall of Fame. He created and produced 17 Canadian Comedy Award shows. His acting career spans dozens of films and television programs, including the Academy Award-winning film Spotlight, and performances on television's hit shows Schitt's Creek, Kim's Convenience, and Murdoch Mysteries. Welcome, Tim Progosh. It's good to see you again, Tim. How you been?
I've been well, Ted, and yourself?
I'm okay, thank you very much. Like everybody else, sort of dealing with the COVID thing and the whole changing world. I mean, it's just, right? Nobody could have predicted this, eh?
It's not the 80s in radio anymore, and
yeah, it's stuff. I don't know what it is. Sometimes I think it's like a dream. We're just going to wake up and walk outside and everything will be back to where it was 2.5 years ago. But that ain't happening. I got to tell you though, we had Kenny Robinson on my podcast back in November, and he brought up the Hall of Fame, the whole concept, and how he was involved with it, and you're involved in it, and it brought a big smile to my face because I have a great passion for comedy, a bit of a history with comedy as well, and I thought, if any country deserves this, boy, it's this country, because you think, people talk, offhandedly, and they say, "Oh, you know how many great comedians came out of Canada?" But until you actually sit down, which you guys have done, and written out a list, then you go, "Good Lord, unbelievable."
I mean, if anybody has a claim to comedy these days, it's Canada, right? I mean, run the numbers yourself, folks.
Charlie Ferguson, your KORN answer man, with all the questions you've been putting down and some of the answers I've been looking up.
You add the box office grosses of Jim Carrey and Mike Myers and throw in the grosses for the movies that come out of Lorne Michaels' SNL Comedy Factory and Ivan Reitman's blockbuster string of hits, you're in billions of dollars of worldwide box office revenues right there. Oh, and let's not forget Dan Aykroyd with the Blues Brothers, Ghostbusters 1 and 2, and Spies Like Us. I mean, his revenues alone come to more than $1 billion worldwide. And then there's the late greats like John Candy and Phil Hartman.
I was just sitting here thinking, we don't get a chance to chat much. So I just thought I'd say hi. Hope I didn't scare you or anything.
This concept, you founded the Hall of Fame, and the concept began in what, 2000? Is it going back that far?
Yeah, I had a television production company back then, and we had this idea that we were going to do the Canadian Comedy Awards and the Canadian Comedy Hall of Fame, and that it would be a chance to recognize the people doing stuff now as well as the people done in the past. And then it was just too difficult. It was costing too much money, and there was just the thing about Canada is we're not interested in celebrating ourselves too much.
I know we're not.
So. Yeah, so that became difficult, and so we put it on hold until we could raise the appropriate funds to try to build a home, and then that presented its own challenges. But we did a lot of work on what a Hall of Fame should look like, what it should be, how experiential it should be, and what kind of exhibits and interactive. And so we've done all that research, and we've done our homework. But in this incarnation, what we wanted to do is to say, well, let's start and build a foundation with integrity. Let's get the right people involved, and let's start getting some nominees in so people will take notice.
Before we move on, let's give out a website here. We're going to do this several times during the course of the conversation here. So that because people can join and people can vote as well. So the best place for them to do that is to go where?
To CanadianComedyHall.com.
CanadianComedyHall.com.
Yes, and there's a Facebook page and a Twitter handle, and they're all Canadian Comedy Hall of some sort, like @Canadian Comedy Hall or #Canadian Comedy Hall. But the website is CanadianComedyHall.com.
And right now, there are nominees available for people to vote on in several categories, and we'll go through those categories. But you've already inducted people in the past. Who already exists there, or whose memories, at least, or whose body of work is already in the Hall of Fame?
Well, in 2000, we put Dave Broadfoot, Don Herron, Wayne and Schuster, John Candy into the hall. And then we added in 2001 the Royal Canadian Air Farce and Rich Little.
People don't realize that Wayne and Schuster made something like 63 appearances on the Ed Sullivan show, something ridiculous like that.
And that's where this whole idea kind of started. As a family back in those days, you watched TV together. So my dad would say, "Okay, it's time to watch Wayne and Schuster. You got to come in, or it's time to watch Ed Sullivan." And guess who's on? Wayne and Schuster on Ed Sullivan. And it was at that moment that I realized how prominent Canadians were, and how we weren't second class. You know, when we grew up, there was this thing. You know, there was television and movies, and then there was Canadian television and Canadian movies. It wasn't really to be thought of, but when you saw Wayne and Schuster on Ed Sullivan, you went, "Oh, they were the best." And
because you think of how powerful Ed Sullivan was. I mean, this is the guy, arguably, who launched the Beatles' career in North America.
Absolutely. And the Doors and the Rolling Stones and George Carlin and Alan King, but my dad had a bent for comedy, so we would, Alan King was, and the comics were what he focused on. And when we saw that Julius Caesar sketch, Blood on the Toga, and Julie Don't Go, that quote. And then many years later, I was sat on the board of ACTRA, and Sylvia and Ben Lennox, who were both cast members of Wayne and Schuster, were on the board of ACTRA. And I got to meet them, and I thought they were huge stars when I met them. I was like all gaga.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, because Wayne and Schuster, as a duo, have been inducted into the Hall of Fame. But now up for nomination is the cast of the television show Wayne and Schuster. Well,
there's a lot of things that we went through when we wanted to set this up. First of all, there was a board established, and then we got a nomination committee, and we tried to get people from comedy. Well, you had to be in comedy at least 20 years, and then people from across Canada, different, and some new, some old. So they sat down, and the task was to take what we had done in 2000 and change it and really get some kind of establish some ground rules and integrity and foundation. So one of the things we said is you've got to include casts, and all the major shows do that now, the ensemble, because sometimes the stars rely on the ensemble. And the ensemble of Wayne and Schuster, the Lennox, and then they would have, the list, they had a list of people that came on, and all the celebrities that would drop by, and former prime ministers and everything were on Wayne and Schuster.
So let's talk about the categories. There's three key categories here, right? Legacy, creators, and performers.
Well, that was set up. The legacy are the people that, let's go back to people like the Happy Gang. The Dumbbells didn't even make that list. You have Max Sennett, Mary Pickford. These are the people that not a lot of people know about, but in their time, they were the best in the world. And when I say the best in the world, they were extremely popular. More people knew who Beatrice Lillie and Stephen Leacock and Olivia Guimond in the world. They would know these people better than the country of Canada. At one time, Beatrice Lillie was more popular than the country of Canada. Same with Stephen Leacock. So, and those legacy people, we determined that it's 50 years from the date of that year. So like we're in 2022 now. So you go back 50 years. It has to be prior to that is the legacy category. The creators category are people who have created comedy and put it on the map and used their influence to create. And that can be new or old. You'll see some of the names like Joanna Downey, who ran clubs for 20 years, but recently in Toronto. Then you'll see other creators going back. So the categories of legacy and creators to acknowledge mostly people from the past are the people that the average public won't know. So when we set up the website and we said, write in who your suggestions were, all these suggestions came in. The Jim Carrey, the Mike Myers, the people of now that they would know that are largely performers, but the legacy and the creators. So that's where we get the industry voting on those people. People have been in the business a long time to know that and to educate people on who they were. And it's real important to me that let's take the Kids in the Hall. They're having a resurgence now, but they've been around for a long time. In 20 years from now, who's going to know who they are? So that's why these legacy categories exist, so we can acknowledge people that have fallen between the cracks and were known around the world. Yeah. Pepiot and Aylesworth. I mean, these are two people that were inducted this year. That's the board and the nomination committee they get 2 picks every year in those categories, and they were unanimous. They were the guys who wrote the Sonny and Cher show, the Jackie Gleason show, Judy Garland show.
And responsible for a big chunk of Rich Little's career.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of people, they brought a lot of people down to California, and they basically invented TV variety. And they started it at the CBC. If I have a second, there's one sketch that they have of them that's the two of them on a Carlton streetcar, and it's the old driver and the new driver, and they're going along, and it's the old driver. I'll drive. You call out the stations. So the guy goes like, Sherburne, Jarvis, Yonge Street. And the guy, oh no, you've got this all wrong. You drive. I'll do the announcements. And it gets to the next one. He goes, you can't understand. And it's applicable today. But
exactly.
So that's why we have those categories to set up so that we can acknowledge those people and pay tribute to them. Then the performers category, it has to be more than 10 years ago, or they have to have work that exists for longer than 10 years. And you have basically people who have lit the world on fire around the world and in Canada, which was another consideration. There's this delicate balance, and there's an argument of people who stayed in Canada versus people who left. And it was our opinion that we have to acknowledge both. We're not going to penalize somebody for staying in Canada, and we're not going to penalize them for wanting to go to the States or go to England and make a career for themselves.
And I'll give you Tim Progosh is the founder of Canadian Comedy Hall of Fame. He is my guest right now. And I'll give you a perfect example is Ron James. Now, there's a guy, he's a brilliant stand-up comedian, extremely successful, and yet a vast majority of his work, if not all of it, takes place in Canada. And you couldn't ignore the body of his body of work, because he didn't cross over to the border.
Exactly.
So what?
And Codco is another example.
Yeah.
There's a cast of people that came out that everybody knows what they set up. The whole, made in Canada, this hour is 22 minutes. That all came from Rick Mercer's career, came out of that group of people. So, but Codco, you wouldn't know them in the United States, but they're very important to the Canadian scene. Likewise, the Pepiot and Aylesworth example of people going to the States that were not known in Canada, that didn't know what they did. David Steinberg is a performer that I thought was one of the funniest stand-ups I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Became a director and a producer and wrote books and did everything, but did it largely from the States. So people in Canada might not know, David Steinberg, he directed, 20 or 30 Curb Your Enthusiasms, and then they're saying, he's an American. Well, no, he's from Winnipeg. So.
And the same is like a person like Mort Saul, brilliant satirist. That most people who would know him would say, he's Canadian. You're kidding me.
Yeah. There's a certain sensibility about that Canadians have in our approach to humor that is very unique, because we have British influence, we have the American influence, but we have our own indigenous and first settlers, storytellers approach to things. Ron James is a current example of what that is. But we take that approach to everything, and our view of the world is so much I think it's educated, is what I could say. We have an educated view of the world and a great perception and a great objectivity.
And polite.
Yeah,
we got to throw that in, right? So let's talk about the people that you can vote for. Again, go to CanadianComedyHall.com.
Yes.
Okay, and you can join. You can become a member, and you become a member depending on what your affiliation to the industry is. You can vote in various categories. So one of the categories. Let's take a look at some of the people who are up for your vote right now this year. Lorne Michaels, of course, the man who brought us Saturday Night Live. I mean, a groundbreaking television, which introduced so many great Canadians to television. People like Mike Myers pop into mind.
Oh, absolutely. And even before that, he had a show. He pioneered his idea for Saturday Night Live, the Hart and Lorne Michaels, Hart Pomerantz comedy show or comedy hour. And that helped get a lot of people. And they had different character players coming in. And there was a real hotbed back then in the late, in the 60s of people trying stuff out. And when he went and started Saturday Night Live, he brought with him over the time a lot of Canadian writers and performers.
And interestingly enough, too, as kind of an aside, he was married at one time to Rosie Schuster.
Right.
Frank Schuster's daughter from Wayne and Schuster.
Yes.
So talk about marrying into comedy royalty.
Oh, absolutely. So, it's hard to argue if the two of them were sitting around the dinner table saying who should be in the cast. I'm sure they would have a good choice.
And meanwhile, the counterpart to Saturday Night Live in this country was SCTV, which began from Second City, and Second City came to us courtesy of Andrew Alexander, someone else who was up in the creator category.
Well, and Andrew did a lot. When he took over, I was fortunate enough to meet him at the start of the Canadian Comedy Awards because this whole thing. He helped me from the very beginning, as did Mark Breslin, another nominee. When I said I wanted to do this, like, well, who are you? And I told these guys what my plan was and where we were going with it. And Andrew stepped up, and so did Mark. But Andrew, when Second City, the live show, was dying in Toronto and couldn't find a home and couldn't do this, he just took the money out of his pocket and rented and kept the show going here and brought this amazing cast together. And the people that he had under his wing, Martin Short, Dave Thomas, Catherine O'Hara, Andrea Martin, Joe Flaherty. Joe Flaherty came from Chicago up. And then they had, then he tried to sell the television show and get these people, because he thought it was so much different. Their approach was so much different that they were creating characters, not so much impressions. Like Saturday Night Live always has these people who can do these bang-on impressions. Every cast always has a couple impressions. The Second City School is not impressions, was characters, and it came from their improv training. They would do these crazy characters. And I remember once interviewing Dave Thomas, and he was saying that Dan Aykroyd nobody could touch him with his characters. And of course, when you saw Dan Aykroyd's career go on, these characters were so bizarre but so real in their, and John Candy and I was a big Second City fan. I liked Saturday Night Live, but I watched Second City way more religiously.
And it's interesting. There are people who love comedy for stand-up comedians, and there are other people who love sketch comedy and improv. I love them. I love them all. And if you sit down and you think, okay, are we best known for one or the other? And I would say up until maybe a few years ago, it was probably more sketch than it was stand-up. But that's changed.
I agree with you, Ted. It's our stand-ups have gotten better, and I think the road was paved by guys like Dave Broadfoot, who's in the Hall, and then another guy who's nominated this year, Mike Mcdonald, I think did more for stand-up comedy in Canada than most people know.
And that's the guy who Ron James suggested in an interview that should be. He said two people that I would vote for right now would be the cast of SCTV and Mike.
Yep, absolutely. And Mike was he was a genius. He was the first one I saw way back in the old days I met him. I was a kid, and we snuck into the Hiccups Comedy Club on Rideau Street in Ottawa to see Jimmy J.J. Walker was the feature.
Yeah.
And we were underage, but we got in anyway. But the MC was Mike Mcdonald. And I remember us leaving going, well, Jimmy was okay, but this Mike Mcdonald guy was fantastic, unbelievable. And then every time I saw him, he was unbelievable. And he was at every year of Just for Laughs. And he was gifted for stand-up. But, then you think the sketch, you have the Codco, and then even groups that aren't nominated, guys like the Frantics and Kids in the Hall. Our sketch work is very, very solid, and I think our writing and approach to taking a topic, there's always a point to it. I love their sketch comedy because there's always a point to it, and an ending, which is always the hardest thing to write into sketch comedy. A lot of them don't really have endings. But
if you don't think that's true, watch 90% of the sketches that you get on Saturday Night Live, because they build and they build and they build, and then they just sort of disappear because nobody could come up with a killer ending.
And the storytelling of both, but yes, the stand-up has really, really evolved. But I still think we're the sketch. But it's hard to say, because even when you go back, like I'm jumping around here, but when you go back and you think of Olivier Guémon and Rose Ouellette from Quebec, who are both nominated in different categories. They are both performers that in Quebec were gods. They were as big as Guy Lafleur, God rest his soul. But these two people, Lapoon, and they had this following, and they would do these little vignettes and these little sketches to capture slices of life and people that you saw. Much like Second City, you recognize that guy in the corner store who's an idiot talking to the guy behind the counter, or who's being obnoxious. And they would take them and physicalize them and make them shine. There's a show in Quebec that they have every year at the end of the year, Christmas. I forget what the name of it is offhand, but they do it every New Year's. It was once a year, kind of like the Air Farce New Year's.
Right. Another
great sketch group. And they did this one about the War Measures Act. And it was a guy, a drunk at the door of a very rich guy in Westmount, English guy, French guy. And they trod that balance, and they did it. It was a bilingual sketch, so rich, so funny, so good. So I think when you're talking about sketch, it's those vignettes to take a segment of something. The donut shop on Air Farce is another example, where it's real to anybody who watches. They can identify with it.
Yeah. Let's take a look at some of the performers. And you mentioned Mike Mcdonald, who passed away a number of years ago, way too young. And then just this last year or so, another Norm Mcdonald passed away, who was another, a misunderstood comedian by a lot of people, but by others. Letterman thought he was just brilliant.
Well, he was brilliant. And I remember I'm fortunate, Ted, in that some of these I have had the fortune of seeing. Like, I've saw Mike Mcdonald probably 20 or 30 times. I saw Norm probably 10 or 15 times. But I saw him one of his first times in Ottawa as a pro, and he didn't stay on the stand-up circuit in Canada very long. He was too original. Like, people wanted him. He went out. Like, some people would take 5 years doing amateur night before they got to pro spots. He didn't. He jumped. He climbed very quickly. And he was so funny. So funny and so different.
Ted Woloshyn returns in a moment.
Hey, let me take a moment to tell you about my friends at Halenda's. They are the meat people. You know, I've been a fan of their products for years now, and without a doubt, they make some of the best sausage in Ontario. They are multiple award winners, having captured the Ontario's Finest Meat Competition's coveted Award of Excellence on 3 occasions, in addition to dozens of individual product awards. Halenda's has also received the Grand Champion ribbon at the past 2 Royal Winter Fair's ready-to-eat meat snack competitions. So whether you're preparing a charcuterie board or a full-blown sit-down dinner for your friends or family, you'll find Halenda's award-winning products at fine meat shops throughout the province, now including selected Metro, Sobeys, Fortino's, and Foodland stores, along with their 7 Halenda's locations. Their barbecued kielbasa is my favorite. On a fresh bun with horseradish, it is out of this world. But don't just take my word for it. Judge for yourself. On your barbecue, in your kitchen, or straight from the refrigerator. Halenda's, the way sausage should taste. And as usual, off we go to 190 Baldwin, the home of Tom's Place. It's in the heart of Kensington Market. We've been talking for a little bit, Tom, about wedding season upon us. And I hearken back I think it's 8 years now since my daughter got married. And I remember bringing in my son and my son-in-law, future son-in-law at the time. And everybody decided that as opposed to getting tuxedos, all of the bridegrooms were going to get really nice dark suits with matching ties so that after the wedding, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, they could continue to wear those suits. And they looked fabulous. Now, not to say that you shouldn't get a tuxedo, because you've got some terrific tuxedos, which I have too. So either one works. But if you're thinking, well, do I want a tux and how often am I going to wear it? Maybe the suit, it works best.
Ted, that's a very good observation, and you did the right thing. And it's very common where people coming to our store with the groom and the groomsmen, and they're buying fabulous, fantastic suits. And you're going to get much more wear out of a suit than of a tuxedo. Exactly correct. So please come to Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin Street. Great storytelling, Ted. I always love how you tell the stories.
I tell them from my heart. 190 Baldwin, the heart of Kensington Market. That's where you'll find my friend Tom and Tom's Place.
Now back to Ted Woloshyn.
Tim Progosh is my guest. He is the founder of the Canadian Comedy Hall of Fame. You go to CanadianComedyHall.com. You can find out more information. You can become a member, and you can even vote. And voting goes on, I think, until the end of May, correct?
And that may be extended. That may be extended.
Okay. So here we are. We're looking at the performers. SCTV. That goes for the cast of SCTV. And yet I'm thinking that virtually everybody within there, and Catherine O'Hara is also nominated this year, but virtually every of the main character from SCTV stands alone as well.
This is where it gets so difficult for the nomination committee and the board to narrow it down. Yeah. Because, this year we opened it up to allow more because it's our first year in 20 years doing it. So we wanted to make sure that we got some people. But you're right. You think of the work, Dave Thomas as a writer and a performer, and he's had his own career. Eugene Levy, The American Pie, Schitt's Creek. But Catherine O'Hara was the one that the nomination committee suggested get on this year because, she has the Home Alone franchise, Beetlejuice. So she's had her own rich career on her own, not just as the cast, although her characters are legendary. Like I want to bear your children. The Lola Etherington. It just brilliant. But yes, I'm sure all of them will be getting in the hall eventually.
Yeah, sure. Codco you mentioned as well, which spawned so many, and it's that East Coast sense of humor it's like this small area of the country is so popular and so powerful in this industry. Well,
and they have their own unique, fresh take on everything. And Codco started out doing these live show reviews, again, satirizing people in their own community and what was going on. And I guess, it's tough to get anything in front of, it's easier now, but back then it was very difficult to get things on television. And the CBC did a great job in seeing them and putting them on the TV because everybody, whether they were East Coasters or not, loved that sense of humor in Canada. We just love it. And then, Mary Walsh and Kathy Jones went on and to form This Hour's 22 Minutes. And yeah, there are other people who I'm sure be considered in the future to get in on their own.
I don't think there's ever going to be a shortage.
No.
It
just stops. So that's why, I when I started this back in 2000, I was fortunate to get on the set of Freaks and Geeks to interview Joe Flaherty and Paul Feig and Seth Rogen, who was only 16 at the time. Just a kid on a TV show, and now he's like a superstar. So exactly. I don't think there's going to be a shortage.
You look back on Al Waxman, the King of Kensington, and when you watch some of these old shows, I was watching a number of years ago, and who's on the show as a guest? Eugene Levy. So it was people like Al Waxman, not only were, showed us how talented they were, introduced us to the future of comedy in this country.
Yes, and David Steinberg's show, he had John Candy and Catherine O'Hara and Joe Flaherty, I think, as a cast for one year. And then Pepe and Ellsworth on the Sonny and Cher show got Billy Van and Peter Cullen, who were two funny guys, one from Montreal, one from Toronto. Billy Van went on, who are, again, there's guys who I think should be in, but it's not mine. It's Canada's Hall of Fame, right? So we're going to get different people at different times, but it goes so deep. But I want to tell you the story. I'm very fortunate that a couple of these people that I got to meet Andrew Alexander, and I got to Mike Mcdonald when he was ill. His first show back, I hired him for the Comedy Awards to come and host an evening for us, and it was his first time, and he was so grateful to be hired. But I had known him for many years. One of our other nominees, Michael J. Fox, that I think most Americans think he's American. They don't think he's Canadian. But I got the chance to do a movie with him, and the first time I met him, and it's Michael J. Fox, and I'm just doing small part as a lawyer for a couple of days or whatever. The movie's called Life with Mikey. And I'm walking in like a wardrobe, I'm walking on set, walking down the hall, and Michael J. Fox is coming towards me, and I'm kind of in awe. And he comes up and he walks by and he goes, "Oh, I saw you on this show last night. It was really funny. You played a 35-year-old paper boy." So I was doing this category on a city TV show with Ziggy Znaimer. It was called Love Avenue, where she would read love poems. And I would knock on her door and deliver her paper sometime. Just a little thing. He was watching TV, noticed it, walked up and came up to me to tell me that, because that's the kind of guy he was. He was gracious, one of the talent, physical comedy. He brought every scene he was great in. These people, I just think they're so great that it's easy to do the work to try to get them inducted, I can tell you that. But he's a guy that I thought was brilliant. I remember in Family Ties, this guy walking around in his shirt and tie is Alex B. Keaton, and he was so dressed up and such a little man.
I think Leslie Nielsen is another one of those people that many Americans would say, "What do you mean he's Canadian?" Well, he's Canadian. I mean, his brother was like what was he, like the governor? No, he wasn't the governor general. He was like the
leader.
Yeah, he was like the
Speaker of the House.
He may have been deputy prime minister at one point or another as well. But I mean, there's a huge Canadian connection there as well, and a lot of people from the States and around the world be going like, "You're kidding me."
And he's I interviewed. I tried to get when I had a television production company, I was trying to do this show called Inside Comedy, way back when. And we were interviewing, trying to find all aspects. And so we got on the set of Due South, and we were interviewing Paul Gross about Leslie Nielsen. And he told the story, and then I've seen it subsequently to be true, so I'm confident in saying this. He never went anywhere without his electronic fart machine.
Yes. There's a great interview. I think it's on one of your websites, one of the Hall of Fame websites, where he's being interviewed by a Conan O'Brien.
No, actually, I am a big fan of those pictures because I love the way you play it so straight. I love the way. I guess the director told you it's not a comedy. Act as though this is deadly serious.
The director. The thing is that we know that we're being funny, but you can't let the audience know for 1 second that you're trying to be funny. Not for 1 second. Although I will do almost anything I can for a laugh. I said almost. I didn't say I would do anything for a laugh.
What have you got there?
Isn't that a little personal? You'd like to see it? That's what I have. There it is right there.
What the hell are you doing? What is the, hold it, let's show this.
You heard the rude noises that it makes?
Yes, I did.
Nothing but fun. I got that from a man in Oklahoma City, Jack Martin. He was a senior golf pro, and one night he said, "Leslie, I'm going to give you something to change your life." I did, too. How do you do? Excuse me. Very nice to meet you.
He's holding this machine in his hand, and this is a guy who's like in his 70s or whatever, like a grown individual with a fart machine, and you can't help but laugh. Everybody, you feel like a child.
And he was dramatic, which was made his comedy so good because Frank Drebin from Police Squad, and then I don't remember a character name in Airplane. Funniest thing I've ever seen. In fact, I still do the line when I'm walking into like a hockey dressing room or something. I'll open the door and say, good luck, we're all counting on you, and then leave. And he did that in Airplane the 5 times in the cabin. And but he's so serious, so funny. But the fart machine, apparently people thought it got to be the point of being too obnoxious with it. But he never went anywhere without it. Any occasion.
It's great stuff. I in the introduction to you, which you probably didn't hear because we pre-recorded it, I mentioned that you yourself have a career as an entertainer. You a producer, writer, not only the founder of the Canadian Comedy Hall of Fame, but also you've been in a lot of television and a lot of film, and some of the people that you've worked with are people who, if haven't been inducted, will be inducted at one point or another into the Hall of Fame. One of two of whom, one which we talked about, Catherine O'Hara, and the other Eugene Levy, because you appeared on Schitt's Creek.
Oh, I got it. Thanks, Ted, for reminding me of that, because it had to be the funniest day of my life.
I must have been.
Oh, well, first of all, the way television gets shot, when you're in for a couple of days, you're supposed to know your stuff cold. Because the stars who are on the show, they're doing ADR from the previous show, doing this show, and getting the script and learning the lines for the next show always, right? Because I've been fortunate enough to have a few series, so I know how busy they are. So the way it's shot is they'll do the wide shot and get the sense of the scene and the geography, and then they go in for close-ups and 2 shots or whatever. So they usually make the people who are the cast the last ones who are getting their close-up. So they will know that they'll get to learn their lines and smooth it out. But you have to be perfect, right, as the guest coming in. So the camera's on you first. They're finding their characters. So on the scenes, I'm selling them a car, and the 2 of them are having to do these lines, and they're riffing. They're riffing uncontrollably and I can't keep a straight face. I don't know how many takes it took, but if I did have a straight face, there's tears coming down my eyes and I'm moving like this. I can't stand because it's so funny, right? And then they set it so well. They set it so well that by the end of it, when it turns around on them, it's like this performance of perfection, and I still can't stop laughing. But very gracious people too, and they listen. That's the whole thing from the whole Second City approach is listening, and what you're doing when you're not talking is as important as what you're saying. Yeah.
This is great stuff, and again, congratulations to you and to Kenny and to everybody who's involved in the Hall of Fame. It's so necessary. Not only is it needed or wanted, but it's necessary because comedy makes up a huge part of the fabric of this country. And I wish you nothing but the best. And if there's anything I can do to help out, just reach out. In the meantime, we'll send people to CanadianComedyHall.com. Join, be a member. You can get all kinds of discounts, and you can vote as well and watch this thing prosper into a brick-and-mortar place where we can all visit and laugh when we need it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ted, and we'll get you involved because I remember you in comedy from the old days in the 80s when I first got here from Toronto.
Yeah, it's everything seems to be the old days nowadays.
Oh, pre-COVID.
Just before we go, tell me about this documentary that you were working on. We talked about that briefly, but share this with the people listening right now.
Okay, so COVID hits, and I'm in South Africa. And just before it hits, I go to watch a women's hockey game, and they qualified for the World Cup. And then they win the World Cup out of Cape Town. They win, but it's the first time that they've done it with their own coaches. So I go out, I'm still play hockey. I'm out Sunday morning skating with them and see how they coach it. They have the one rink. They have about 60 people. They break them into groups, all ages, all races, all skill levels on the ice at once. They break them up, and then one group leaves and does chalk talk where they explain what hockey is.
Yeah.
There's off-ice training. The other guys do all their on-ice skills. And then at the end of it, they break them into teams and have 4 or 5 games during the day. Out of this, they have leagues that I didn't know of, and they just won. The men just won their division in the World Cup, and I just thought it was fantastic to see these other countries, because in the past they did have teams, but it was all coached by Canadians or Germans, or
of course,
and then COVID hit, and Justin got on the TV and said, "You got to come home now," so I came home.
You going to finish it?
I hope to. I really hope to. I was fortunate enough to film a TV show there 20 years ago called The Adventures of Sinbad, and I lived in Cape Town, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, that'd be great. Tim Progosh, thanks very much. We'll talk again.
Thanks, Ted.
The Ted Wallacham Podcast has been brought to you by Halenda's, the Meat People. Enjoy their award-winning products at selected Metro, Sobeys, Fortinos, and Foodland locations. Halenda's, the way sausage should taste. And Tom's Place. For the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices, it's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. The Ted Wallacham Podcast is produced by Joey Roselli. Technical production by Paul Gatt. Music by Bike Thieves. I'm Becky Coles. Submit your questions and comments to ted@twmedia.ca.